All right, so welcome to the Go Ask Me Anything, except for you'll be asking them anything you want. And today with me, I have members from the Go team. We have Julie, Rebecca, Carmen, Russ, and Samir. Not sure what Samir does, but he asked to be here, so we included him. So with that, we're going to have each person go ahead, starting with Julie, introduce themselves and give people an overview of who you are and what you do on the Go team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie. I'm a software engineer on the Go team, and I lead the team that builds the Go package discovery site, which, if you haven't tried it out yet, it lives at pkg.go.dev.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca, and I work on editor support for Go. So specifically, I work on GoPlease, which is a language server that provides editor support for different editors like VS Code, Emacs, and Vim.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carmen. I work and partner with the Go team out of the Open Source Programs Office, and I lead open source strategy for Go, thinking about how to make the open source project and the Go ecosystem healthy and sustainable.
Hi, everyone. I'm Russ. I'm the overall tech lead for the Go project, and I work on a little bit of everything.
Hi, I'm Samir. I am the engineering manager for the Go team. All the Swedes report to me. But it mainly means I'm the primary interface between the Go team and Google.
So Samir, you still haven't quite explained what you actually do. So I'll give you another opportunity at this. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so I talk to a lot of people inside Google about Go and help make sure that what we're doing as a team is well represented and aligned with various people's interest in what Go is doing and the value we're creating.
We'll go with that. So, so the first one's going to be for Rebecca. When I say Go Please, what comes to mind?
So GoPlease is basically, what should come to mind is just editor support and IDE-like features for any editor. Basically, it's a language server that is basically you can use to plug into any editor that you choose, and it will provide the same features across all these different editors, which makes it really easy to add Go support to a new editor or to get new features to new editors really quickly.
So break that down a little bit for me. So I remember when Go first came out, and I'm a Vim user, and I don't have any plugins that I use, and I just power through it with the standard documentation in my tab, and off I go. There are people who use really full-blown IDEs. How does Go Please help with them?
So for an editor like Vim, basically, Go Please sort of levels the playing field for all editors support. So there's obviously Goland doesn't use Go Please, so that's kind of a more full-blown IDE that we don't actually support. But other editors, like the ones that are free, like VS Code, Vim, Emacs, usually right now, VS Code is kind of the most popular editor, so the Go support for it has typically been the best. And someone who's more used to Vim or Emacs is not getting as great support because they rely on the different maintainers of these different plugins to provide that, to add new features and work on things. And basically what the language server protocol does is it says, okay, really we want all the same features for all of our different editors. So if we create one server that provides these features and then we can hook it up to each different client or editor, then that makes it a lot easier for us to build these features out and to get them to users faster. So Vim is actually a really interesting case because there's a ton of different language clients, which is basically the front end for the language server. And each person can pick the one that they find to be the best or the fastest, the nicest, and they choose that client and they all connect to GoPlease on the back end and get the different features from GoPlease surfaced to them in Vim.
So you mentioned features quite a bit here. So when you say features, what do you mean? It's like autocomplete? What do people should expect when they hear features?
Yeah, so basically things like auto-completion, jump to definition, find references, the kind of default stuff that you're used to having. But we're also trying to work on adding more features that you maybe haven't seen as much in Go. So, or features that are, typically we would use a command line tool to get access to them. So things like extracting extracting a piece of code into its own function. This was not, I don't think many people would have been able to access that in Vim, but we recently actually added that to GoPlease, and now people will be able to do that in any editor that supports it.
So the next one's for Russ, and I think according to Wikipedia, you're one of like 2 people who use the Acme editor, you and the person who wrote it. So does Go Please work for the Acme editor? And if it doesn't, tell us a little bit about, your workflow using the Acme editor.
So GoPlease, actually, someone did do a language server protocol, extension for Acme, and so you can use it with Acme. I've used it for a little bit, but it's just not how I work, so I haven't gone back. I also turned it on in sort of the mode where it just constantly tells you everything, and it was a little overwhelming. So I think that if I had it not chatting at me so much, and I just used it for things like refactor this piece of code, I think that would actually be really helpful. But I haven't had too much time to play with that.
So I think.
But in my normal workflow, I just, I have a bunch of tools. Acme has really good support for running shell commands, and you just build up a whole lot of shell commands that help you navigate things, whether you're in Acme or at the command line.
Awesome. So, what developers are using all of these tools to create things. And, as of recent, maybe a couple of years ago, we've been deploying this new way to discover all of this code that's being written. And there's been a lot of new developments in this area. So Julie, could you give us a breakdown of maybe what Go Package Discovery Site is and any of the latest advancements there and some of the things you're working on?
Sure. So on a very high level, the Go Package Discovery Site, the goal is to become the best place to find and discover third-party packages and be able to have the information to help you evaluate if this is something you want to pull into your project. So this is something that we actually launched about a year ago today. And over the last year, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from everyone, especially after open sourcing and being able to have discussions about these issues on the issue tracker. And so in the last year, we've actually been focused on just getting the core functionality and the user experience right and make sure the way that we want people to understand the relationship between a package and a module and maybe even a repository and how that sort of connects end to end in the Go ecosystem is something that we've been really focused on this year. And I think that now that we have this and we just launched this redesign on Tuesday with Go's 11th birthday, we want to move into surfacing more information for users that will be helpful. So really be able to say when I look at this package on the Go Package Discovery Site, it gives me the information I need to know is this something that I want to put into my project based off the criteria that I'm looking for in a third-party package.
So is this kind of the official place where Go developers should be looking, publishing their packages? Or would there be multiple of these kind of discovery endpoints? What's the thoughts there?
I think from the Go team's perspective, this would be the one site that we are supporting. And something that we actually want to work on in the next year is just sort of unifying the web experience for Go in general. Right now we have Godoc.org, we have Golang.org, we have Go.dev and package.go.dev, which is part of that. And I think right now it's not necessarily totally clear to a user, should I be using Godoc.org? Should I be using a discovery site? We actually announced in the beginning of this year in January that we were planning to redirect Godoc.org traffic to the discovery site this year because the discovery site at this point effectively, we wanted to support all the features that people love from Godoc.org, but also with module awareness. And so that's why we wanted to do that this year. Obviously, COVID and all the other things in the world that had happened delayed the project a bit, but that's something that we're also really focused on next year. So there is a place where people can go and say, this is the site that the Go team is supporting and putting effort into, and I know that this is the one place that I should be going to find the information that I need.
So if you were stepping back from this, when I look at Go, since I can follow things closely, I use it all the time, I'm in tune with the mailing list. But for some people that are not that connected to the Go community, they may look at all of these things like Go modules and this package service, the rebranding, and they always ask, what's the strategy behind this? So Carmen, you help run open source strategy, especially for the Go team internally here at Google. What is the strategy behind it? Why are we working on what we're working on, and how do we prioritize that?
I think that that's going to be in my closing keynote. But maybe to not give it all away, some of the strategy would be when a language starts to mature, we start to see a new set of people who we need to win over. And over the last 5-10 years, we've already won over the people who we are intended to win over, who see the point. But we now have to overcome new people, to kind of give them the tools and an ecosystem. And we recognize that people don't choose just a language, they choose an ecosystem. And so providing them these other places like the package discovery site and maybe some of the case studies that you're going to see in solutions.go.dev, putting together the Go Developer Network as well as the meetup to give people who are coming into the language a sense that if they have questions or if they want to trust to bet on Go, that you can trust to bet on Go because we have these stories for you.
All right, so I'm going to go in some corners that I know the community would like to go into. When language communities mature like this, you'll hear things like calls for foundations. And this question is open for anyone to chime in because Go has come a long way, right? We're saying we're in year 11th. People now have these decade-long, LinkedIn profiles about all their Go experience. What have you heard, I guess, in the community where Python has a foundation and Golang doesn't? Has that been a thing that has come up over time? And what do you all think about that? I'd love to hear from multiple people here. No, we're not dodging. This is a panel here, right? Because you all have been involved in this for a while. So I would love to hear multiple people's opinions here.
My opinion is that, what's my opinion? Well, I've looked at what problem we're trying to solve. And the problem we're trying to solve is to make everyone feel heard and to make everyone feel like they can, if they need to make a change in the way things are run with Go language, whether that's governance, transparency, decision-making, that they can do so. And so I often think of foundations as solving that problem. The other things that foundations solve is things like marketing, is the ability to provide more content venues, things like that. And what we've done so far, I think, is allow people and empower others to continue to have those things. And we also partner a lot with the GoBridge, a foundation, which is GoBridge. And their main remit is for providing technical education for underrepresented groups. And so right now, I do often ask the community if how they might feel about ownership, about transparency, about decision-making. And it also prompted a series of posts by Russ, which talked about, we had a contributor summit and we talked at length about this with people who had been veteran and also new contributors to the language and what they think should be improved. And then Russ's 6 posts were an outcome of those discussions. So I will punt that over to him to maybe talk a little bit more.
And before we get to Rush, I want to know, Samir, you manage the Go team, right? I remember the Go team is like the holy grail. I remember people walking around as, I'm on the Go team. What does that mean? And how is that team organized? Give us a little insight into the Go team.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The Go team has grown substantially over the years. I don't know if I can talk exact numbers, but many dozens of people. It's largely Swedes, but we've done a lot of work over the last few years to really diversify and bring in a lot of cross-functional partners. Carmen is a great example. One of them, we have product managers, marketing manager, tech writers, UX designers, and it really has enabled the team to work much better. And I'm really happy with where we reached. My role is primarily managing the software engineering organization. There are a set of managers under me, and then there's the ICs. We're distributed across several sites. And to your point about strategy, I work with all of our stakeholders across Google in terms of what Go is doing, both outside of Google and inside of Google, and how we are related to Google's business. And then as our engineers are the ones who are most in touch with essentially what our Go developers are needing from the language, from the ecosystem. And the real shift we've seen in the last few years is that we've gotten beyond the design of the core language and maybe the core distribution to a whole slew of now ecosystem elements. What I think more about the Go platform than just the Go language. And so the work that Rebecca's doing, that Julie's doing, that Carmen's doing, really are rounding out the whole platform offering that we have for Go developers. And that, I get to be a part of all of that in partnership with Russ and Carmen and Steve Francia and others.
So Russ, I'm going to bring it to you, and I'm going to preface it with this. I remember contributing to the Go kind of standard library. I think I added basic auth support to HTTP. It was probably one of my last contributions. And I remember the review process was very stringent, and it ended up, being much better, taught me a lot about the design of the language. But I've seen you do this a number of times where the community will produce some great ideas, even prototypes. And I think Go modules is a good example of where that was a very contentious point in time where people were like, oh, we have something that works perfectly. And then you broke out this, I don't know, it's probably like an encyclopedia of packaging on your website. And you broke down like the package problem and how Go should attempt to solve it. How does that relate to this? And how do you kind of continue on making those kind of tough decisions in a way that is still community friendly?
Yeah, I mean, modules was definitely a point of friction with the community. Part of what we learned, there were a bunch of things we learned from that. I mean, the blog post series that Carmen mentioned, just talking about how we handle governance and how we make decisions, was all essentially inspired by what happened after that, all the discussions we had after that. One of the things that we didn't do right with modules was that we were having a lot of conversations among people in the community even, but just privately before all of those posts, and we probably should have been doing those publicly as well. And that was one of the things we learned. There are a whole bunch of other things we learned just about ways to scale discussions. So when we get things that are really big that a lot of the community is going to want to talk about, like generics, or even over the summer, we had some discussions about there's support now for the next release of Go for doing static file embedding into Go binaries. And as part of that, there's a new file system API. And we're changing build tags in the release after that to actually use Boolean expressions. And all of those, we expected a lot of people to want to give us feedback. And so, we learned from modules and some of the other stuff to really present first the sort of design draft and just say, look, this is a draft. We're trying to get early feedback. We're not proposing to do this yet. We just want to get feedback, and then really take the time to listen to that and incorporate whatever changes need to be made, and just be upfront and transparent about all that. The other thing that we did that we've changed is the proposal process. So there is a proposal minutes issue now that anyone can star on GitHub, and they'll get the weekly minutes that show what we're looking at. And really, in those weekly meetings, we're just trying to drive consensus on the issues. We'll comment and say, it sounds like people are generally in favor of the following. Like, is that true? Do I have that right? And then when it seems like there's consensus, we'll say, like, okay, it sounds like there's consensus. It sounds like this is a likely accept. And then we leave it for another week for people to say, oh, no. Or more often, no one speaks up, and we say, all right, well, there's no change in consensus, so that's accepted. And so we've added a lot of this sort of process here to really make sure that people are being heard. And I think that was the biggest takeaway we had from what we learned about from modules and just all the aftermath of that. And I hope that that's actually worked out pretty well for generics. I mean, we're gonna find out as things move further along. But we've had multiple design drafts come out for generics. We have the prototype out. In general, I feel like I have not heard the same sort of feedback that we did with modules, that people don't feel like they've been heard, even people who had been proposing other alternatives. And so I hope that we're doing better now, because we did learn a lot.
And sticking with that, I think, Julie, you've been working on the Go package dev site. And if I remember correctly, I think we've recently open sourced some things in that area. Was that because of this framework? And if we have, what's the result of that?
Yeah, I think definitely it's fits into this with working on the discovery site. So when we started building it out last year and launched a beta in November, and so leading up to that, I think a lot of stuff was done internally, and it was mainly just because we were still trying to figure out what exactly we wanted and sort of how to just get a beta out. And so now that the beta was out, I think there was a lot of process stuff that we didn't really just have the time to figure it out. So this is a production service. Do we open source the code? How do we communicate things? When this feature will be live versus when it's merged into the code base. There's also a whole slew of UX issues, which I think that in most of the other repositories and projects, we haven't necessarily had to deal with before. So getting feedback from our designers, getting feedback from our UX researchers, and figuring out sort of how we can share some of those findings publicly, and also some of the things depending on privacy, whatever reason, maybe it can't be surfaced. And I think a lot of times also we'll get features will say well, I think this thing should look like this. And so kind of trying to figure out what exactly is the ask here? Is it visually this isn't working? Is it something else that's blocking? And really just pulling in our design team to help us with that, I think has all sort of fit into a lot of the learnings that Russ has talked about. And definitely, I think that like even with the most recent redesign we had, like something we did spend time doing was I published like a series of issues on the issue tracker. And part of that was really just to so that people knew like what issues we were addressing and what we were focusing on, the rationale for the changes that we were making. And I think from that into the redesign, like so far, I found that the reception has been a lot like better than I think we probably saw like in the beginning of the project when we first became beta. And I think we've also just like in the course of the project been able to make better decisions because we are incorporating decisions and having really productive discussions on the issue tracker. So I definitely think it flows into some of what Russ has discussed.
And the next question is for the team. So a lot of people are curious, like how is the release schedule put together? And I think we're going to start with Rebecca here because, you know, as someone that has to, you know, keep this language servers maintained, people expect that to be compatible with all the features that are coming down the pipeline. So maybe I'll start with you, but this question is for the team. How are releases put together and how is that release schedule maintained?
Yeah, so for Go Please, it has a totally different release schedule than the actual Go project. So we actually try to release it, like we've been trying to do it more frequently lately, like once every 2 weeks. There's actually going to be a release today. And then we have, you know, the major versions that maybe are less frequent. But keeping things compatible with the actual Go release has been a difficult challenge for Go Please because, you know, while officially the Go project supports like the last 2 Go versions plus the new one that's upcoming, a lot of Go users are actually not always updating to the latest Go version. So we have to, you know, someone still might be on Go 1.12 and we still have to allow them to download and build Go Please in code. So what we've done is the newest features may only be available in later Go versions, and there are some bugs that might only be fixed for later Go versions. But we have CI set up to test Go Please with versions starting from Go 1.12 and forward. So that's kind of been an interesting figuring out how to keep things compatible while still moving forward has definitely been an interesting challenge.
Samir, Carmen, want to jump in here? Samir, you claim to manage said team that is responsible for said release schedule. This is your opportunity to prove such thing is true.
Yeah, I mean, to Rebecca's point, what I was saying earlier is that now that we have a larger platform, right, we actually have many sub-teams that have separate releases. So we have the main Go release, the biannual Go release, and so you've got the compiler, runtime, standard library, Go command, all of that folded up into that biannual release. But of course, it's also monthly point releases, security releases. That's a continuous cadence. You know, and we recently looked at, you know, how is that release processing? What's our ratio sort of issues coming in versus issues we're resolving? All those sort of operational things to make sure we're being well disciplined and we're noticing interesting trends like increase in macOS use, increase in Windows use. Like Windows use is growing gangbusters on Go. That's an interesting indicator and something we want to make sure that we're attending to as we say resolve issues that are specific to that platform. Meanwhile, you know, the discovery team, as far as I understand, y'all are totally turnkey. You know, get some changes out, you can push it out essentially whenever you want. Rebecca's team is a much more accelerated release process relative to the rest of us. We have Hana Kim on the VS Code Go plugin. And then there's actually a team that's focused on Go inside Google, and they, of course, have their own process. We have an integration pipeline between Go at head and that internal Google copy of Go that we're running for Googlers. All of these are sort of tied together. We also partner with the Kubernetes team. They actually now integrate Go from tip, I think, every 8 hours, run a series of tests to make sure that Kubernetes is still humming along with the latest Go. So we've expanded essentially our Go validation set to include a lot of key customers, both inside and outside of Google.
Yeah, I remember that. I think maybe Russ even got pulled in on that one. I remember when the compile time for Kubernetes takes 7,000 years to compile from scratch. And I remember we were just taxing the Go runtime quite a bit. Maybe Samir or maybe even Russ jump in. Like, I think we started to say, look, Kubernetes is a very important project, and we almost use it as this kind of test framework to make sure that Go is actually getting better in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely you know, care about Kubernetes, and we have for a long time. Actually, you know, a number of years ago, we were testing with them more frequently, and then it just sort of fell off, and we've reestablished it. But as far as the main releases, early on in Go, like when we first started, we didn't have any releases. You just built from the repo, and then we started doing weekly releases where like everything broke. Like every week you updated and things broke, and you had to fix your code, and that was a lot of fun. And at some point we realized like people aren't going to actually build companies on this if we're breaking their code every week. And so that was what led to Go 1. And one of the things we wanted for Go 1 was really stable, solid releases on a predictable schedule. And the predictable schedule actually came later. We weren't thinking about that at first. And Go 1.1 was, I think, 13 months after Go 1. And we said, you know what, probably we need to do this more often. But we also want to take time to really soak things and make sure that they're solid before we say, hey, this is something you should run in production. And so, right now we're on a very regular cycle. We have releases come out in February and in August, and everyone plans around that, and we hit that.
So Carmen, Shamir mentioned that we're seeing new Mac OS users. Windows users are kind of growing. How does that impact the strategy? How does that impact how we think about this?
Well, we always try to make sure we hired, and part of the cross-functional team, user research. So UXR internally at Google, to be able to get feedback constantly and in different variations from places, including the annual Go survey, so that we can have this data to be able to take action on it. And that we now know not just that they are Windows users or Mac users, but also what kind of things are their biggest pain points. And that is what's helping and driving some of the integrations and the improvements. And that is including in UXD, which is part of Julie's team.
Awesome. So this kind of dovetails into like the biggest thing questions I have is, when is Go 2 coming? Like everyone seems to know, when is it coming? And then for the developers out there who've been on this journey for the whole 11 years, how will they know it's time to move on to Go 2?
So there are a few different answers I could give. I could say Go 2 is not coming. I could say Go 2 is already here. We're not going to break people. Like this is not going to be Perl 6 or Python 3. Everything's going to keep working. And at some point we might decide, we've changed enough. We're going to call it Go 2. But we're not going to break people's code. And one of the nice things about modules is that the go.mod file has a version in it. It says, Go 1.5, or it doesn't say 1.5, it says Go 1.16 or something like that. And each dependency module also has that line. And so, if we want to make a change that actually breaks something in Go 2, that some line of code is no longer valid Go, we can still build older code because it's tagged as, being for Go 1.17 or Go 1.19 or whatever. And so as long as we keep the support in the compiler to compile the old constructs, nothing will break, everything will keep working and interoperating. And that's really the plan. Like whether or not we eventually say, hey, this release we're gonna start calling Go 2. It's not like there's gonna be a clean slate where you just like erase everything and start over. We're really focused on bringing everyone along and doing things incrementally. Like we might decide, when modules are like completely done and generics are completely done, like we'll have a big Go 2 party. But it's just there's not going to be some point where it's like, oh, everyone has to switch to Go 2 now. It's just going to be the next Go release.
So what's the status of generics, right? That question comes up quite a bit. Where are we at there?
Robert gave a talk yesterday. I think if you after the AMA, I think you can go watch the recording. We have a prototype out. If you look at the Go blog post, actually, the one from yesterday or earlier in the week about the birthday, there are links to the Go generics playground where you can actually it's like the Go playground, but you can try the generic version of Go that we've been prototyping. And right now we're working on doing an implementation. And the plan is to try to get something to people towards the end of next year that they can actually run in production.
Another big thing that comes up is, there's been asked, and I've seen this over time, when are we going to think about maybe splitting up the standard library and offering people the ability to have maybe version V2 of the HTTP package? I see Samir smiling there, so he probably has some thoughts there. And this question is for the whole team.
Yeah, I think there's two questions there, which is one, can we decouple the standard library release cycle from the main Go release cycle? And another is, should we have V2 of various standard libraries? And then what's the story for that? I think decoupling the release cycle is interesting. And there's a set of standard library packages that are closely tied to the release. I'm thinking about the runtime package, and there's several others. And there's others that could be decoupled so we could roll out fixes much more rapidly and not. And the two issues are related in the sense that there's a migration problem introduced either way. Whether you have a V2 or whether you're moving where you get the package from, you now have a huge body of existing code that's just taking it from the current location in the standard library and now has to start using it from a new location or start using a V2 path. And the only thing we can assume is the code that exists that use the existing libraries will persist in approximately forever, right? And we need to support that approximately forever. So any new versions we provide really needs to be solving an important problem, and we need to make migration sort of as automated and as smooth as we can.
Yeah, you said that V2 flag. This is one of those things that hurts the purest soul. Like your package import is looking nice, you're happy about it, and then you see this V2. How do people deal with that? Because I'm one of those people where the vanity is so serious that I just refuse to put that V2 there. How should people be thinking about this? Question for anyone.
You know, when we first started putting, like originally in Go, like you just downloaded code and like you'd say, oh, this is the Q package, and you like download it and like stick it in a directory named Q, and you'd import it as Q. And then when we introduced Go install, which preceded Go get, you know, all of a sudden there were URLs, and people said, oh, that's ugly, like I don't want to see that, and all that sort of stuff, right? So I think that, you know, we haven't seen that many V2s because in general, a lot of the time you don't actually need to break compatibility and you know, do a V2. But I think that, you know, over time, like we'll see plenty of these version numbers, and they'll just sort of fade into the background like the URLs have. I'm not too worried about that, but I think we need to just get used to it.
So suck it up is the answer, folks. Put that V2 in there and call it good. Stop trying to be all purist about it all. So how would that impact the things like, you know, the language server? How does that impact the discovery site? Maybe Julie and Rebecca jump in there, because that seems to have a big impact of which one should I be using, right? Like maybe you're maintaining both V1 and V2 and not necessarily deprecating one or the other.
Yeah, this was actually one of the biggest UX challenges I think we had after like our initial launch last year, because when we did it, when we first sort of like launched the discovery site, like November of 2019, it was just, here is a site that has information about modules and packages. And so immediately we see all these issues that are like, well, like in my search, when I see V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, like which one am I actually supposed to like click on? And if you're on the actual page and you're looking at like V2, how do I know if there's a V5 or not? And it was really interesting because purely from like the perspective of like modules, you know, these things are related, but like from like a pure technical perspective, it's like, well, this could have been called anything, and like the relationship would be exactly the same. So we actually like have spent a lot of time figuring out sort of what the definition of latest is, and latest can mean so many different things, because is it the latest minor version in this package, and even within that, like is it the incompatible version that has the highest latest semantic version, or is it really not that? And I think also even when you look across major versions, well, what happens if V2 has like a tagged version, but V3 is the latest major version, but it only has pseudo versions? Now, like which one is the latest? And so I think that Discovery Site was the perfect place to sort of provide all this information for users and really provide it in like a pure like technical like sense. And so if you go to a package now that has the later like major version, you'll see a banner at the top now that says like, this is like the high or like the highest tagged version for this package is actually this. And we picked the language highest tagged version because of all of these like details where, you know, we're saying like, this is, when we say the word latest, we don't want to like over like load that definition. And so if you, on the discoveries, actually, there's a lot of like little things that'll pop up, like a badge here or a banner here and there. And it's really to get at this problem of like, of major versions, of minor versions, and just of this like multi-definition for latest.
Yeah, we've had to deal with kind of a similar thing, but to a lesser extent in the language server as well, because the way that Go imports works in module mode is that it just looks for the version of the package in your module cache. So if you haven't downloaded the latest version, you're just going to get the version that's already in your module cache. And a lot of the stuff that we focused on is adding kind of more language features to your go.mod file. So now actually, if you're using an older version of a module, you can open up your go.mod file and it'll basically show you code lenses, which are basically just little like text annotations that you can click on. And those will say, okay, there's a new major version of this, you can upgrade. And similarly, you can hit like upgrade all of your dependencies in your file. And that'll run like the relevant go get commands with the -u flag to upgrade everything. But we're definitely hoping to do more, I think, in that space, and basically like let you, right now you can only upgrade just to like the latest version of the go command will give you. But hopefully in the future, we'll be able to add more features, like, pick a different version, or maybe add eventually at some point some integration with the discovery site, so that, if you haven't actually downloaded this package in your module cache yet, Go imports can still offer it to you through some form of an API or something like that.
I have a question that comes up a lot, and this is for people that are approaching Go. And there's this new world that I've seen kind of evolve around my tech career, which was when I first started, we got most of our language dependencies, even things like libraries, from the OS, right? So when I started with Python, I would do a yum install Python package, and then all of my apps would use it. It was a gift and a curse when things would break. But now I'm seeing, even in the container world, where people are building these static, the link Go binaries. But one thing that's been challenging is, how do I know what the things I depend on, if there's any security vulnerabilities that need to be updated? And this question is for the whole team. This is a big part of open source strategy for a lot of companies who are afraid that their existing tools won't work. And there's some language constructs that, can I trust what's in my Go mod to communicate maybe some of those annotations that you just mentioned?
I'll chime in, and if we have Filippo around on the thread, I see it on the Discord. He's also a person who can rope in. This is very top of mind, and one of the things I do in our role is we also talk to Google's customers who are using Go, and it's very top of mind to them. To your point, security vulnerabilities are just a major threat in every ecosystem. One of the great things that modules has empowered us to do is, every Go binary now ships with its own manifest of, here are the modules I depend on at those versions. And so if we have a way of indexing known security vulnerabilities by, say, modules and package and version ranges, you can do a very simple join to notify the user. We think we can even do better than that, right? We think we can even help Go developers understand exactly how their application is invoking, say, a function in a vulnerable package that triggers the vulnerability. So this is definitely on our roadmap. This is something we're actively working on and investigating through 2021. And hoping to provide better support for understanding whether and how your Go program is vulnerable. And then that information hopefully becomes available to you both through the ID and the discovery site. So that's all part of the picture we're working towards.
And you also want to jump in there to such a complex topic? Because what I'm hearing here, there's been this theme that Go mods, just the whole concept of modules, enables us to do so much more than we could ever do before with just blind binaries being tossed around. It sounds like it's kind of the key to the bigger picture in terms of Go's ecosystem.
It really is. I mean, the thing we didn't have before modules, and the thing that a lot of the earlier systems that people used for Go didn't really have either, was there was no like ecosystem-wide agreement on what a version meant, and the tools didn't know what versions meant. And the thing we were trying to do the most with modules was to sort of add versions to just the vocabulary of the tools, and Go programmers have everyone agree on what a version meant, so that you could say like this package is this version, and just have that just smoothly integrate into everything. And so like getting everyone onto modules, getting modules working was really the first step. And now we're getting to do all this other stuff on top of that, now that we could just assume, well, like versions are a concept. Now we can build new things on that. And the security stuff is obviously a important follow-on, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff around like upgrading your programs and the discovery site, and just so many other things that just fundamentally wouldn't have worked without this like ecosystem-wide agreement on exactly what it means to have a version of something.
I got one more question here. Oh, go ahead.
Just to connect the dots between what Russ is saying, Kelsey, your question earlier about V1 and V2, there's a vision here that the tooling then helps you upgrade over time. And you could even imagine automation. And this was in some of Russ's early module docs where, you're on, say, V1 of a package and you want help migrating to V2 because that's where the development is, or it has new features, or it's safer and more secure because it, disallows bad coding patterns. And modules and the particular approach to major versions and modules sets us up for that, because those sort of large-scale code migrations require the old and new versions to coexist, and modules is designed to exactly support that coexistent to enable this incremental migration. So I think we're really set up quite well now with modules, with the IDE, with discovery, to make these transformative changes to Go ecosystem and really help users, evolve their code over time. So that I see a future in which, there's a vulnerability in your package and you get a notice in your IDE that you're vulnerable. You can just click to upgrade to the new version that doesn't have it anymore, or click to patch it out, right? There's all sorts of neat stuff we can do, and we're building the foundation for all of that. And this team, this large Go engineering team, now, we're in all the right places to really deliver really nice integrated improvements to your experience. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, so one question. So we're going to go into, there's going to be some low-level questions, high-level questions. What we're going to do here, we have some questions from the community. I've been interweaving them in between. So we're just going to go a little bit rapid fire. We have about less than 10 minutes left. So we're just going to jump in. There's one question. I'm going to start with the first one, selfishly. It's been this phenomenon that when you think about web programming, immediately you think about JavaScript. And when we think about all these backend services where you're talking about tools from HashiCorp, such as Vault and Console, or Kubernetes and Docker from the CNCF, or Prometheus, how did this happen? Is this how did all of these people across all these different communities, when they're working on this kind of stuff in the backend or some of these backend distributed system technologies, why are they picking Go year after year?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. And I know Carmen, I think, also is very familiar with the dynamic here. We have a lot with Go to be thankful for in terms of both Docker and Kubernetes picking it up early. Those two projects choosing Go created a great deal of momentum in the early days of cloud infrastructure. And they built communities that understood Go, that embraced Go for the value it was offering for building these large-scale, highly concurrent systems. We needed a lot of people collaborating. And so that played to Go's strengths, right? Simplicity of code, consistency of formatting, ease of learning, and then just scalability and performance out of the box meant its suitability to task, which is collaborative open source development of infrastructure. No other language hit all those in place. And once you had those, right, those first couple of projects, then those same community, that same group of people, they grew and they kept building more projects, right? So you got Terraform, you got Istio, you got gvisor, you got, I think last time I looked at it was the full 3/4 of projects in CNCF are written in Go. And so it does come back to community. It comes to momentum. It comes to shared knowledge and relationships between these people who want to build the future of how we build app software and infrastructure at scale. And Go, I admit we got lucky that we were chosen, but we were chosen because it was fitness to task. And now the momentum is there. And we see it even continuing now that because Kubernetes is so widespread, all the organizations that are building on Kubernetes, they end up writing Go code to write custom resource definitions or to write integration. Then they start using Go for their own internal tools, for their DevOps pipelines. And so Go is spreading very, very, very organically throughout all that. And Carmen, I'd love if you could chime in on more of the community aspects. I know that you're in touch with that.
One other technical aspect that I thought was great and suited to the task is that Go was not meant to be a perfect academic theoretical language like others that I won't mention, right? It's really meant to onboard inexperienced engineers that, at a large company quickly and then build it and not wait for compile time and things like that. And so I think that when Go was created, it was meant for thinking about Google and onboarding tons of engineers at Google, but Kubernetes works just the same. And so the Kubernetes ecosystem exists, and we have a lot of new people coming into that because they use Go, and Go is really easy to pick up, and it's really easy to understand. It's really easy to grok. It's really easy to contribute to for projects written in Go. And I think that is one of the things, when you get rid of that decision fatigue or conceptual overhead, then you can just get to building and pairing and getting code reviews out. And then proposing. So that is what kind of like Samir is talking about, where it just starts to get more and more people interested and engaged and active. So we get to see these really big projects do it, but then they also model how to do these things at large scale, and then they modularize. So it's great to see in the open source ecosystem all these other CNCF projects, but other also projects that are web-based, or we see things like TinyGo as well, which is using the LLVM compiler, that they're sort of seeing Go as a suitability to task in different domains. And I mean, I could go on and on about it, but I really feel like Go as an innovation hit a lot of the right spots, right? To be able to diffuse an idea. And then my keynote also talks more about this as well.
Yeah, someone who's out in the field a lot with engineers across all of our customers, I'm surprised to see now in insurance agencies and banks, they're actually picking Go for things that maybe Java was going to be the first choice. So it's great to see things evolve there. We only have a few more minutes left. And so this last question is, Go has been doing great, but there's always room for improvement. What are the areas, maybe what are Go's kind of weakest links, or what are areas for improvement in Go? And we're going to start with you, Julie, and we're just going to work our way around. Name that thing and maybe what we can do about it.
Oh man, I think that like purely from the perspective of the discovery site, like one of the things we can do is onboard people better. I think like across Go.dev and package Go.dev, there's a lot of opportunity here for an onboarding journey, so that when people come to Go, like it's friendly, it's easy, it's this thing you can just like get something up and running with in less than an hour, which you can. And I think really just
Awesome.
improving
Rebecca.
that experience.
Yeah, speaking from the editor side of things, I think that there's still quite a lot of room to grow there, especially because we're not actually officially in a stable state yet. We're actually not yet, GoPlease is not yet on by default in VS Code. So a lot of this year is going to be spent getting it on by default in VS Code in February, and just improving the stability and getting the user experience to be better and more intuitive, especially for new Go developers.
We need everyone, and everyone's not here yet.
Russ?
In addition to like all the stuff we've already talked about, I think Go is meant for software at scale, and that often means refactoring. And I think that we have an opportunity to build some really amazing refactoring tools for large code bases. I've been working on something along those lines the last couple of weeks, and I'm excited to.
I look forward to the 28 blog posts that you will have on the subject, Russ. And Samir?
I think there are really interesting problems that other technologies have solved that Go doesn't. I look at Rust's ability to statically prevent data races. I look at how an operating system can provide strong isolation between different users competing for the same resources. Those are problems that the Go runtime and the Go language don't necessarily solve for you. And I think to Russ's point, that comes up when you run software and services at scale. It'll be interesting to see what we can do there.
Awesome. And that's it. I really would like to appreciate the Go team for taking the time to engage with us, answer the questions from the community. So even though we can't see the people, let's pretend they gave us a big round of applause.